Hi guys, welcome to our long-awaited video which is going to fill in some issues with succession. So we'll call this one How Octavian Became Augustus and Established the Principate. So again guys, no notes necessary, just listen to what I'm about to tell you. Again, this is purely to fill in gaps, but the first thing I'd like to do is just draw your attention to this handsome statue. I think I've showed this to you before, but this is possibly the most important and widely copied depiction of Augustus, and it says a lot about his power. It's the Prima Porta statue, and it's named so because it was found in Livia's one of Livia's villas outside of Rome. It was created towards the end of Augustus's life, despite the fact that he looks about 21 here. And it really tells you a lot about what he established, and that's basically what we're looking at here today. So this week we're looking at succession, we're looking at the transition between emperors, but really before we do that, we really need to understand what Augustus established, being the Principate, and how that was basically an agreement between a whole bunch of different groups. But if you have a look here at the Prima Porta statue, I really love this one because you can clearly see on Augustus's face, and you can find a close-up image if you'd like. It's very Julian, so beautiful, delicate, angular features. Isn't he a handsome devil? He's also shown barefoot, which is a nod to divinity. He's wearing a breastplate. The imagery on the breastplate is really in depth and really says a lot about his military accomplishments. We don't have time to go into that. But he's also pointing off into the distance as well, which is another sort of nod to divinity. The third and final little nod to divinity is just down here. There's a Cupid riding a dolphin, which is like my favourite detail of this. And he looks like a little cowboy, which is quite cute. This isn't a depiction of Augustus so much as a depiction of the Principate. So this is a really important image of him and what he created. And what we need to do is we need to go back a bit to the death of Julius Caesar and talk about what happened in between and the two settlements that Augustus went through with the Senate. The first in 27 BCE and the second in 23 BCE. And this established the Principate, which was then passed to Tiberius. So basically, it took about, so Julius Caesar is assassinated in 44 BCE, and it takes roughly 20 years for Octavian, as he's then known, to establish himself as the sole source of power in ancient Rome. In between, he hunts down, defeats Julius Caesar's assassins. He overcomes Mark Antony, his ally, after Mark Antony spurns Octavian's sister, goes and hooks up with a little woman called Cleopatra. He also has other issues to overcome, like pirates, but that's another story for another day. Basically, by 27 BCE, he's the sole source of power in Rome. He's the last one left. The last heir to Julius Caesar, and he faces several problems. The first one is that it's become clear after the events after Caesar's death that the Republic has just failed. The empire has grown too big, and there needs to be a new system of government put into place. Given Rome's history, which you'd all be aware of from the earlier videos, he can't rule Rome like a king. There needs to be another situation. However, the army at this stage is twice its normal size. It numbers 60 legions, which I'm not sure how much that is, but it's millions of troops, and they're all ridiculously loyal to Augustus. Augustus at this point, who isn't known as Augustus, he's known as Octavian. And that poses a massive threat to the city of Rome. And this is what really sets Octavian out. He's not really a military leader. He's wildly successful as a military leader, and he's a great general, and he has other great generals around him. But he's not a general in the form of in the same mold as Julius Caesar, Marius, or Sulla. He doesn't want to use his military power to sort of enforce political power. On some level, he must have respected the traditions of Rome and wanted to work within that to create a new system. Okay, so basically, and the Senate recognises this. So in 27 BCE, the Senate essentially reached a settlement with Augustus. He returns to Rome with his army, and that settlement, the first settlement, leads to sort of the creation of the Principate, which is then solidified 5 years later, roughly, in 23 BCE. And we'll talk about that just in a second. Okay, so let's get into the first and second settlements. But first, we'll just talk about where Augustus's power at this point rests. So this is something that historians debate about all the time. I really like a historian called Werner Eck, who talks about how Octavian at this point, his power came from a number of different areas. And I'll just read. This is a really good quote that is quite famous, but I found it on Wikipedia. So basically it says, the sum of Octavian's power derived first from his various powers of office delegated to him by the Senate and the people, secondly from his immense private fortune, and thirdly from his numerous patron-client relationships he established with individuals and groups throughout the empire. All of them taken together formed the basis for auctoritas, which he himself emphasised as the foundation for his political actions. It kind of ignores the religious aspect of Augustus's power, but I really think he's on the money. Basically, at this point, Octavian had the loyalty of the army. He also had extensive political success, and he was also a ridiculously significant patron in Rome and in the provinces. So basically, in 27 BCE, when Octavian becomes the sole source of power, the Senate really can't ignore him. So they reach a settlement. So in 27 BCE, in January or February, Octavian returns to Rome with his armies. He dismisses them and relinquishes control outside of Rome, which is the normal good republican thing that a general could do instead of marching on Rome. The Senate then offer him a huge amount of titles, and a lot of them are symbolic, and they contribute to this idea of auctoritas, this vague idea of authority, whereas a few of them actually carry significant real political power with them. So the first thing that the Senate do is they offer him a new name, which is Augustus, which means the illustrious one. And this is in keeping with, a Roman tradition of granting successful generals names that are somehow connected with their victories. He's also hailed as an imperator, which is the Roman word for a victorious general. And with that recognition comes, a massive festival, a huge parade, but also what's granted to Augustus, and this is one of the real political powers that he gains, is the power of imperium. So that's the power of military command throughout the empire and within the Roman Peninsula itself, which is very, very significant. He retains that connection with the army, and the Senate are trusting him with that. Do you remember in the period preceding Caesar, it's generals that march on Rome and take political power for themselves and push the Senate away. So on some level, Augustus must have respected Rome and been concerned for its stability. Probably the other most significant power that he gets is one in the Senate. So he's recognised as princeps. Hey guys.
Hello.
Hey. Yes. He's recognised as princeps, which basically means first senator in the Senate. So he gets the right to speak first, to set the agenda, and he also gets the right of veto. And it's no surprise that after this settlement, Augustus is one of the consuls of Rome for the next 5 years straight. And that changes. He's also given something called the civic crown, which has been awarded before, but it's basically given to someone who is seen to be like a defender of the safety of the city of Rome, which is pretty significant. And basically after that, with apparently some convincing, Augustus accepts and becomes or continues to be the sole legitimate source of power in Rome Hang on just one sec. Okay.
It's having a nice soundtrack too.
It is actually. It's having a really nice soundtrack. Okay. Another thing that Augustus and the Senate do, and I'll just show you this awesome map that I found. Look, it's not very big, but you can get the gist of it. So basically, one of the issues was during this period was that the empire was too big for the Senate to manage. So Augustus actually split up the empire into two different groups. So the first group in orange are the senatorial provinces, and they were the ones that the Senate basically ruled over and managed. This was great because they were often the parts of the empire that were pacified, peaceful, wealthy. They didn't require a lot of military intervention or quick decisions. They were very stable. Because of that division, the Senate were able to collect taxes and rule, whereas the parts in green are the dirty, unwashed, violent parts of the empire which aren't subdued yet, and they become the domain of Augustus. So he's responsible for maintaining law and order, military incursions. Are you right, buddy? You okay? Yeah? That sort of thing. Those provinces aren't as lush with tax as the others. So the Senate, I'm sure, would really enjoy that. The purple sections of the map are client kingdoms, and we talked about those before, and I think I used, was it Gabe and Arabella as examples of that. Okay, so after 27 BC, things swim along merrily. The aristocracy get annoyed slightly with Augustus's perpetual consulship. It doesn't leave a lot of... Gosh, I live in like the noisiest suburb ever today. Say hi, guys. Hi, guys. Do you want to come in? Hi. Mummy's making a video. So things go along swimmingly. The aristocracy are annoyed about Augustus's perpetual consulship until he falls deathly ill in 23 BCE. And basically what happens is he names his nephew Marcellus, so his sister's son, as heir, as it looks like he's going to die. He doesn't. He then goes on to live for like another 35 years, wow. However, the first thing he does when he falls ill and it looks like he's going to die is he gives up his perpetual consulship. And after this point, during his reign, he only holds it twice during the rest of his lifetime. And they're both the years that his grandchildren come of age, which is quite lovely. Like he's consul with them. But basically, the Senate, after his recovery, the Senate bestows more powers on him, which solidify the Principate. And I've only got 2 minutes left, so I'm going to have to hurry. He's granted the powers of tribune for life, which is massive. If you remember our lesson on the cursus honorum, tribunes have the ability to veto anything that the Senate passes. And also he gets the title of perpetual censor, so he's able to kick people out and add people to the rolls of the Senate, which is basically solidifies his power. But the important thing to realise is Augustus's power rests on the goodwill of the army, right? And the army never waver in their support of him during their lifetime. They do revolt after his death, but Tiberius deals with that. And basically these powers are the gift of the Senate, which is really important. Rome hated kings, so this is the major problem with succession. How does Augustus pass on these powers and preserve what he's created after his death? And that's probably the biggest issue with succession. Women are also a problem, but we'll have a look at that later. Guys, listen, I hope you've gotten a lot out of this video. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you're having a great weekend, and I'll see you in class on Tuesday.